Good afternoon. I'm Lee Cagiola, and I'm one of the lucky ones because I'm the board of directors of WREN, which is a great opportunity. And then I have been given a wonderful chance to introduce today our next speaker, President Krista Newkirk, president of Converse College, one of 15 women's colleges that started way back when there were very few women's colleges, and also has been recognized as one of the top colleges by Forbes magazine. She spent her early years in Missouri before attending the University of Missouri's Honor College and then the University of Nebraska in Lincoln, and received her bachelor's degree in English. After college, President Newkirk went to law school and received her Juris Doctor from the Marshall White's School of Law at the College of William and Mary. While there, she was the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Women and the Law, and when she graduated, was recognized by the National Association of Women Lawyers as an outstanding woman law graduate. After working for several years in private practice and for a Fortune 300 company, she joined the Office of Legal Affairs at UNC in Charlotte. It did not take long for her to be made the Chief of Staff at UNC Charlotte in 2012. And then in 2016, she was selected from a cast of many talented people. She was selected to be the president of Converse College, the 10th president of Converse College. The chairman of the board at the time said, when looking at her qualifications, that what set her apart was, and I quote him, her strength as a strategic thinker who understands all facets of the higher education enterprise and skillfully leverages partnerships to achieve mutual success. So please join me in welcoming President Newkirk.
Thank you. Thank you, Lee. Well, good afternoon. It's such a pleasure to be here with you all this afternoon and to see my fellow women in this room as we look at the issues of women and economic empowerment. At Converse, we focus on helping women find their inner strength and their voice, and we try to provide them with unique leadership opportunities. At Converse, by the time they graduate, 65% of our students have participated as leaders on campus compared to 35% of the national average. That's something that we really focus on. We want to start them early in finding their voice, taking on those roles, and becoming comfortable when they go out into the world. I was asked to talk with you today about the role of higher education in empowering women and the impact this is having in South Carolina and the Upstate. But I'm going to tell you a lot of data as well. But before I do that, let me tell you my story a little bit. And this goes to your question earlier about how you rise above and location and move beyond. So first off, let me say that I think education is the most powerful and transformative thing a person can do to change their future. As Nelson Mandela said, education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. I truly believe in this power of education. You see, although both of my parents attended college, neither of them graduated. My father, though, built a business by working, saving, and then buying a nursing home, which he ran. And he was very successful, but ultimately unfulfilled. And he saw that he was missing a lot of time with his family as he worked many hours and traveled. He worried that we, as his family, my two brothers and I, were missing out on a fundamental education that he experienced being raised on a dairy farm. And so he decided, in an act of faith, to sell his business and to buy a cattle ranch, to start a cattle ranch in Missouri. Now, this was a really wonderful and exciting time for my family. We bought 200 acres in the Ozark Mountains. We moved, we built a house, much of it by ourselves. We raised a barn. We went to auction and bought cattle. I bought my first horse at 6 years old after saving my money from hoeing the garden and such. It was the ugliest horse you've ever seen, but it was my horse. And we were excited. We were working harder than we ever had before. But we were doing it together as a family, and we were spending time together, and we were seeing the fruits of our labor, and it was really rewarding. And then the beef market dropped. You know that time when they started to connect beef with heart disease? That wasn't a good time for cattle ranchers. And so we started to miss mortgage payments, and we started to fall behind. And my father started to struggle to make ends meet. He started to try to find another job. You see, he couldn't start from scratch again because he'd invested everything into this ranch that we were developing. And so the only job he could find, because he didn't have a college degree, was to be a grain salesman. And he did that to the best of his ability, on top of getting up in the morning and working the ranch. The pressure of all of it, though, became too much. And my father's high blood pressure skyrocketed. And at the age of 40, he had a brain aneurysm, and he died. And that left my mother with a 200-acre ranch, having not grown up on a ranch or with a farming background, 3 kids, ages 8, 13, and 15, and a mess of a financial situation, which she had never really learned or had her arms around because my father handled all of that. I remember watching her sit at his desk and go through the bills and look at the ledger and try to figure out where we were. And I would see her with her head in her hands, crying. And at 8 years old, I was sad, I was angry, and I was really scared. I decided then that I was going to do whatever I could not to be in that situation. I was going to go to college, I was going to have a backup plan, I was going to have a safety net. I didn't know what that was going to be or what that was going to look like, but my mom had an estate attorney who was handling my father's estate and helping us with some of those problems. And it was a woman. And I'd never seen a woman attorney on television. There was Perry Mason, right? I saw how she sorted through problems and worked on those issues and supported my mother. And I thought then that that was where I wanted to go. That experience as a child and my parents' belief and encouragement set me on a path that has led me to stand before you today. I believe in the power of an education, and I believe in the power of education for women. There's an African proverb that states, if you educate a man, you educate an individual. If you educate a woman, you educate a nation. Okay, so now to the data. Let's talk about the state of education and workforce in the United States and in South Carolina and the Upstate, and the differences that we see. And I'm going to follow and repeat a lot of what you've heard from Dr. Childers, who did this so well. The great news is that nationally and locally, young people are focused on education. Nationally, 70% of high school graduates attend a 2 or 4 year college. And women are attending a post-secondary institution at a higher rate than men. 72% of women who graduate from high school are continuing their education compared to 67% of men. It's 5% higher. If that's the national picture, so what does the local picture look like? Well, 84% of Spartanburg County residents have a high school degree or better, with women ranking 2% higher than men. And in the Upstate, almost 60% of college-bound students are women. And we know that the aspirations of college-bound women in the Upstate are high. Because of all the Upstate students who've taken the SAT, 36% of college-bound female high school students in the Upstate plan to earn not just their bachelor's degree, but also their master's degree. And half of that 36% plan to go on and earn a PhD. That's astounding. Because you compare that to right now, the national population that has a master's degree, and that's only 8%. So you've got 36% who are now saying they're going to get a master's, compared to 8% of the population that holds a master's now. And you've got 18% of women who took the SAT saying that they're going to go on to get a PhD, compared to 2% of the population that has a PhD now. So the fact that this many of Upstate students plan to go on to that level of education is particularly impressive when you consider that 51% of these SAT takers in the Upstate are first-generation college students. And in fact, at Converse College now, about 40% of our students are first-generation college students, and 43% of them are Pell Grant eligible, meaning they're the highest need students. In addition to that, 51% who are first generation, 20% of those are low socioeconomic households. So these Upstate high school female graduates will go on to earn their degrees at higher rates than their male counterparts. Nationally, 57% of the bachelor degrees awarded by four-year public and nonprofit institutions are to women. Women are getting their degrees at a higher rate than men are. And the Upstate is rich in both educational and occupation opportunities. There are 18 different 2- and 4-year public or nonprofit colleges in the Upstate. Higher education opportunities range from certificate and vocational training to doctoral degrees, and from small liberal arts institutions that provide a great personal focus with a focus on accessibility and affordability and producing women leaders like Converse, to a large research-intensive public institution in a rural community that has a pretty good football team. So a college education continues to be valuable. Compared with a high school degree, the unemployment rate is nearly a third lower for those with an associate's degree and nearly half as low for those with a bachelor's degree. It's safer if you have a college degree. And average earnings of a bachelor's degree, of an individual with a bachelor's degree, is 65% higher than those with a high school degree. So what does that really mean? It means if you get a bachelor's degree, your salary is on average $20,000 higher than if you don't have a bachelor's degree, if you have just a high school degree. That's the biggest pay jump we see. If you go on from bachelor's to master's, that pay jump is $16,000 on average. So the biggest pay jump you can get is getting your bachelor's degree. What does that turn into over a lifetime? Well, having a bachelor's degree over a lifetime means that you will earn almost $1 million more cumulatively in your lifetime. South Carolina women are more educated than South Carolina men at this point. 29.3% of women in South Carolina have a bachelor's degree or higher, compared to just 25.9% of men. That's over a 3% difference. If you look at the opportunities for individuals in the area, we see significant economic growth that led to Greenville being recognized as the 4th fastest growing city in the United States in 2017. And other upstate metro areas are also growing rapidly with increased investments in businesses and infrastructure. The unemployment rate in Greenville is a staggeringly low 2.4%, and Spartanburg is 3.1%. That's compared to a national average of 4%. So I've given you a lot of data and information on South Carolina and the Upstate, so let me kind of take this to summarize. Women are graduating high school at a higher rate than men. There are a lot of college opportunities in the area, and particularly for women. Women are going to college at a higher rate than men. More women in South Carolina have college degrees than men. Women are planning to go on to graduate and go to their master's or doctoral programs at a higher rate than men. Those with post-secondary degrees earn more money than those who don't have them. Women are earning more post-secondary degrees than men, and we live in a region with strong economic growth and low unemployment rates. All right, so you summarize all of that, and if you were to extrapolate, you would say, okay, if I had to ask you which gender earns more money, what would you say? Right? They've got more education, more opportunities. But we know, because Dr. Childers just told us, that in fact, women in South Carolina earn 73 cents on the dollar for full-time work compared to men, or 27% less. And that's improved by 6% since 2005. So what does that mean on average? Well, it means they earn $15,861 less every year than their male counterparts. And if you take the average lifespan of someone, their working lifespan of 35 years, that calculates to $555,000 less in their lifetime that they have to invest in their retirement, to build a safety net, to put their kids in college, to pass on to future generations. Thus that map of going from the bottom quartile or to the top quintile that you saw. So when confronted with this data of inequity, many people respond that the pay gap can be explained because of the fields in which women tend to work. Yet we know that men and women tend to have comparable rates of education within specific industries. So in the analysis of 20 largest industry groups in South Carolina, only 3 revealed a statistically significant difference between the educational attainment of women and men. So in other words, the educational attainment of men and women within the majority of industries in South Carolina is comparable. This implies that any gender wage difference within South Carolina's major industries is not the result of education. Women are statistically less likely to have a bachelor's degree or higher compared to men in just 3 fields: financial services, professional, scientific, and technical services, and healthcare and social assistance. And those differences likely result from the distribution of occupations held by men and women within those industries. For example, within the healthcare and social assistance industry, women are much more likely to become home health aides than men, an occupation that requires no formal level of education. And we know that despite the fact that women make up 44% of the workforce nationally, it's 44% nationally, they make up only 28% of chief executives, 28% of computer systems managers, 26% of all computer and mathematical occupations, 15% of all architectural and engineering occupations. And yet, and we know 75% of all healthcare workers, but they're still underrepresented as physicians and surgeons, which are only 43%. So if we don't start changing the areas where women are focusing their education, these problems will remain or possibly get worse as we see our society move forward with more focus on technology and STEM areas. In many fields, especially STEM areas, women continue to be underrepresented. 80% of the degrees in engineering and computer science awarded by upstate colleges and universities were earned by men. 80%. Men also earned higher percentages of degrees in math and physical science. These STEM areas represent higher percentages of degrees. These STEM areas represent higher occupational demand and higher earning potential careers. Yet the trends of students' interest begin long before students set foot on a campus of a college or university. Only 3% of high school women in the Upstate indicate an interest in engineering as an indicated major. 3%. And only 1% indicate an interest in computer science. Less than 1% state they intend to graduate with degrees in mathematics or statistics, programs that are leading to high demand and high-paying careers in data analytics. And this disconnect means that colleges and universities in the Upstate can't enroll enough women into STEM programs to meet the needs of our growing industries. Working to correct this means we have to be involved as mentors and program coordinators to encourage and foster the educational potential of women in our community. And we have to start from very young ages. Dr. Childers talked a little bit about the pay gap, and I didn't have this in my notes, but I wanted to bring this to your attention. We had a speaker on our campus this last spring from Goldman Sachs, and she talked about this concept Goldman Sachs developed years ago called womenomics. And they looked back in the early 90s when Japan's, their economic situation was in decline. And they did a study in the early 1990s and determined there was one thing Japan could do to quickly fix the problem, and that was to pay women equally. That was in 1990, and I'm betting at Goldman Sachs at that time it wasn't a woman who did that study. And they still say that. They say that if Japan was to close the gender employment gap now, it would boost their GDP by 13%. Think of what it could do for the United States. So what can you do to help this situation? What is your takeaway? Well, women need role models. Taking you back to my story, I was inspired at a young age by seeing this female attorney help my mother. I watched as she competently handled those issues, and I knew growing up that I wanted to be in that role. Young girls need to see and interact with women who are working in these fields that we know there will be growth and that lead to higher paying jobs. They need to understand that these fields are not dry and disconnected from people, that they're not what you see on television, that they're working with people and technology to solve problems, to make their lives better. When they struggle with mathematics and science, they need to be told that they can succeed and that they are naturally good at those areas. We have got to stop perpetuating this idea that girls are not naturally gifted in math and science, and we need to bring more programs in these areas to girls where we can engage them, like we've seen the Girl Scouts do with some coding programs and such. So what can you do to help address this area of inequality? Well, you can help girls find at a young age their natural strengths in STEM by bringing programs to their schools or to girls' groups. You can serve as a role model to inspire a young woman. You can mentor young women while they're in college or at their first job. You can lobby and vote for policies that support families and that will help women and men as they strive to balance work and family. And you can help connect young women to great opportunities in the Upstate while helping companies find the diverse workforce they need to be successful, because they need women in those workforces to be successful. So I challenge you to write down just one thing that you will do when you leave here today to open up opportunities for women and to help close this wage gap that imposes such a hardship on women and on the course of their life. And I hope that you will be inspired by the information that you've heard today. Thank you very much.